It's funny, as I was walking in and listening to the brothers and sisters have fellowship, have conversations in the Lord. It's like every conversation I heard was about the edification. So if you want, you don't have to, but if you want, you can turn to Matthew 5. I'm going to read verses 1 through 12, but really what we're going to take from it is just in verse 1. And we can call this edification crowds or disciples.
That's good already.
Matthew 5, 1 through 12. And as we read it, many of you may recognize it, this passage. So Matthew 5, starting verse 1. And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. In this very famous passage, often called the Beatitudes, the first verse says, And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. This one verse tells us at least three different things. First, there's a difference between crowds and disciples. Second, there's some things Jesus reveals only to his disciples. And third, disciples follow Jesus up the mountain and learn from him.
Oh, that's good.
So if you look at the verses right before Matthew 5, that's chapter 4, 23 to 25, it tells us right before Jesus goes up the mountain, he was preaching and teaching and doing miracles. Crowds were coming to him from all over to be healed. And this is the crowds. You come to Jesus for what he can do for you. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because we all need Jesus to bring healing to our hearts. We all start out in the crowds, and God tells us to bring our illnesses and injuries to him through prayer. But Jesus invites us to become his disciples, to learn from him and serve his kingdom. When Jesus does a work in our lives, he asks us to learn from him how to share his work with others. And this is where God reveals to us where our hearts are. One of my newest favorite verses, Jeremiah 17:9, it says, The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And what that means is, how often do I deceive myself into thinking one thing only to find out I'm totally wrong? And so I need God to reveal my own heart to me because I don't even know what my heart thinks. Is my heart on the plains or on the mountain? Do I want to be with the crowds or with the disciples? Am I here for what Jesus can do for me, or am I willing to see what Jesus wants to do through me for his kingdom? And this is the struggle. Counting the cost of leaving the crowds and following Jesus up the mountain. Because I have to make that choice to leave parts of myself behind. Every thought, word, and activity that does not help me climb the mountain. Because everything that doesn't help me climb the mountain ends up weighing me down, and it keeps me from following Jesus. I used to play video games. Now, I think that's generally morally neutral, but did that point me personally to Jesus? No, not me personally. I used to watch pornography. That's sin, very clearly, and sin always pulls us down and away from Jesus. I used to love food. And when I say love food, I mean like in a bad way. Now, is food bad? Food itself, no. It's a necessity for life. But I was sinning in gluttony. I had to leave all that behind. And it's not an instant thing, by the way. A lot of times, it takes a lot of time. But I had to make the choice to leave all those things behind. So when you're standing in the crowd looking up the mountain at Jesus, it's easy to take my eyes off Jesus and look over at his disciples. They're trying to climb the mountain, right? So you're looking at everything they're carrying with them, everything that's in their pack, every burden they're carrying. The sins they're carrying on their back are clearly seen, especially if you're using a super zoom lens on your Ultra HD camera. But when you're standing in the crowd, when you're standing in the crowd, there's a lot of people around you eager to agree that Jesus shouldn't be on the mountain. He should be on the plains healing the people. Jesus shouldn't be teaching sinful disciples, but feeding the crowds. But here's the thing. Jesus delights in taking sinners from the crowds and making them saints for his kingdom. Jesus delights in sending the saints of his kingdom to the sinners in the crowds to be his arms and legs, taking the healing and feeding presence of Christ to a sick and starving world. He does that through the saints. Why? Because he wants to. But serving in God's kingdom isn't required by law, and it doesn't come with glamorous rewards. It comes with persecution and hardship. So why would I want to serve? It's simple, really. We all want that abundant life. Serving Jesus means living life with Jesus. Living life with Jesus is how we get that abundant life. Amen.